When solving radical equations, we need to remember about SADMEP. What SADMEP is just PEMDAS backwards. And we use SADMEP to solve. So if we're solving an equation, we first want to look for things to subtract or add to the other side. Then we want to look for things to divide or multiply. Then we want to undo any exponents. And then we need to undo anything or begin working on anything inside the parentheses. A square root is kind of the same thing as parentheses. We can't begin undoing terms inside the square root until we have moved everything away from it. So that's the thing that we work with last. To undo a square root, we must square both sides of an equation. So a square root, again, looks like that. When we square something, like let's say I want to square 4, it would look like that. Taking the square root of 4 is the opposite of squaring 4. So let's take a look at the first problem and talk about how to solve 2 square root x minus 8. So following SADMEP, we first need to look for things to subtract or add to the other side. So we want to get rid of this minus 8. So we're going to add 8 to both sides. So we have 2 square root x equals 8. You might want to square now to get rid of that square root. But what we need to do first is get rid of the 2 that's in front of it. Since this is 2 times the square root of x equals 8, we're going to divide by 2 in order to undo it. So we end up with the square root of x equaling 4. Now we can finally get rid of the square root. So we're going to square both sides. So our final answer is, our final answer is x equals 16. You can always plug your answer back into your equation to check. So let's do a quick check to make sure that we got the answer right. So we want to make sure that 2 times the square root of 16 minus 8 equals 0. Well, the square root of 16 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. And 8 minus 8 is 0. So it looks like we got the right answer. Let's take a look at the second problem. We have the square root of x minus 7 equals 0. So I want to get everything away from the square root, or add 7 to the other side. So we have the square root of x equals 7. And then to get rid of the square root, I square both sides. So my final answer is x equals 49. The next problem, 12 square root of x minus 3 equals 0. Think about what we need to do first. If you knew to add 3 to both sides, you're right. So we have 12 times the square root of x equals 3. So before we get rid of the square root and square both sides, we need to divide both sides by 12. So we get the square root of x equals 3 over 12, but remember that can be reduced to 1/4. Finally, we need to square both sides to get rid of that square root, and I am going to put the fraction in parentheses before I square it. When we square a fraction, we need to remember to square the top and square the bottom. So 1 squared is 1, and 4 squared is 16, so x equals 1/16. Problem number 4. There is a lot going on in this problem, so it's very important that we follow the procedures of SADMEP and get everybody away from the radical first, and then work with just what's inside the radical. So the first thing we want to do is subtract 12. So we have 4 times the square root of x minus 7 equals 16. We need to get rid of this 4 out in front, so we're going to divide both sides by 4. So we have the square root of x minus 7 equals 4. So notice now we have this x minus 7 trapped inside the square root. So we cannot add 7 to both sides yet. What we need to do first is square both sides. So we get rid of the square root. So we have x minus 7 equals 16. And then we can add 7 to both sides for our final answer of x equals 23. Let's try number 5. Do you know what to do first? If you said subtract 7 from both sides, you are right. Good job. So we have the square root of x minus 5 equals 5. Do you know what to do next? If you said square both sides, that is correct. So we have x minus 5 equals 25. And then the last thing we need to do is add 5 to both sides. So our final answer is x equals 30. Pause the video, try these practice problems on your own, and then restart the video to see if you got them correct. Check to see if you got number 1 correct. Number 1, you had to square a fraction, so make sure you squared both the top and the bottom. So your final answer is x equals 81 over 4. Let's work out number 2 together since it's a little bit tricky. So the first thing we need to do is subtract 5 to both sides, so we get the square root of 5x equals negative 5. The answer to this is actually no solution. The reason for that is technically if we square root a number, it can't equal a negative and still be a function. I know we talked about before how if we take the square root of 4, we get plus or minus 2. But when you're solving, it's different. So if you're solving and you end up with a square root equaling a negative number, we automatically get the answer no solution. So watch out for that in class when you're working on your bookwork. Check to see if you got number 3 correct. Number 4 is a little bit tricky because we end up with the fraction 100 over 9 and we need to add 1 to it. So just make sure that you get common denominators and you change 1 to a 9 over 9 before you add it to 100 over 9. Let's take a look at number 5. So number 5, we want to add 4 to both sides. So we have the square root of x minus 8 equals 6. So even though this one started with a negative, it's okay because when I add 4 to the other side, I get a positive. So the square root of x minus 8 can equal positive 6. That's okay. So now I want to square both sides to get x minus 8 equals 36. Add 8 to both sides. So my final answer is x equals 44.